Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Louisa. It's a beautiful day here in Queensland, Australia, and I'm just called to share today some insights that I've been having that I hope will contribute to the beauty in your life. I also want to thank people that have been watching my videos and my material and perhaps contacting me and letting me know, because it's honestly the reason I'm doing it. This is just a service literally from the heart, and you know, we're all being called to do that in our own ways at the moment, whether you're doing it just one-on-one, people you meet, helping them out, supporting them, or you're doing it on a forum like this where you're making a video or you're teaching in some way. We're all contributing. It's all super important and it's all super exciting. So today the topic that I wanted to talk about, it's called liberation from conflict, and it came about from some quite humbling realizations that I've had recently to do with a relationship in my life, a family member who I've had, I feel, a lot of conflict with over the course of my life. It's what I would call like a polarized relationship, where what I believe, he believes the opposite. And over time of, you know, with family, you got your family for life, so you grow up with these people. Over time, that polarization developed into, just a lot of hurt, a lot of anger, a lot of ill feeling, and a lot of resistance in me, where I didn't really want to deal with this relationship or face this relationship. And for much of my healing journey, I worked on this relationship and my feelings, but I often worked on it in the context of I've been hurt by this person, and so I need to own and claim my own power. I had to kind of build myself up again so that the judgments that I felt were coming my way wouldn't hurt me. And as I've said in another video, I made one on I can't think what it's called. It's about healing from estrangement. I'll put the link below anyway, because it's really relevant to this video as well. But in that video I talk about how a lot of us folks who are healing our core wounds and our traumas, especially those that have been exemplified by our family of origin experiences, so our experiences in childhood, what we were taught, and the relationships we have with our mother, father and siblings, and possibly our children as well, or spouses, those really close relationships that have deep karmic ties and are they're not just invitations to resolve trauma, they force us, they push us to resolve trauma, because we can't get away from these relationships. Even if we try, even if we go for total estrangement, you know, they're still up here and they're still in here. These people do not leave us. So I've always known it deep in my heart that it's super important to work on these relationships. But you know, the stuff is so tricky and so hard, and there are stages and phases that I think you go through before complete healing is attainable. Those are the stages I talk about in my other video. But today I wanted to share a specific insight I had around this particular relationship, and it's what I would call the fuel for many conflicts in these relationships is the victim-persecutor dynamic. Which is not a new concept. You can Google that and you'll find plenty of information about these. It's like a pattern, a dynamic that's set up between two people. And one person tends to be, or think of themselves as the victim, so they've been hurt by this other person who then becomes the persecutor. There's a third part to the dynamic, which is called rescuing, but I won't go into that today. It's sort of superfluous to this chat that we're having. So for many years, I first of all had to wake up to the fact that I felt really hurt by this person, and that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I sort of had to forgive myself and realize that we were just really different, and that a lot of the hurt that I was feeling because of his actions and his words and his deeds was really because it was like my weak spot. Like he was able to really hit that weak spot, and it's unconscious, I believe. I don't think people are usually deliberately mean, but there was some kind of pattern where he would say something and I would be really wounded and hurt. And because I was the sensitive one in the family, when I then expressed that hurt, I would be told that I was too sensitive, too emotional. I'd be laughed at, ridiculed. My feelings were invalidated, which would just send me further into the victim mentality, right? So from my perspective, working with this stuff for many years in psychology, etc., I was the one being hurt and he was the one hurting, or hurting me. But then, as the perspective expands, and that's what I'm always talking about, is expansion. So we have one narrow truth or idea of why something is the way it is, and then we expand and we gain another level of awareness. So as I expanded, I started to understand why he might be acting this way, and I could see that we had sort of an unconscious contract, a bond. You'll often hear about this talked in spiritual circles, that we have like psychic contracts or bonds or cords with people. And one of the cords that we had between us was that, I believe, and again, this is not validated, so I'm just mindful that it's my opinion, but I believe that he wanted something from me that I never gave him, and that was, I guess it was unconditional love and a maternal kind of a love. I was, in that position where I could have done that, but I didn't even know that he needed it. Do you know what I mean? So it was an unspoken thing. Often these cords and contracts are unspoken. We don't know about them until we expand our awareness and look into our subconscious to really see what's driving a lot of the behavior. But essentially, I started to realize that I had disappointed him in a lot of ways, that I hadn't fulfilled an expectation that he had of me to look after him, to care for him in an unconditional loving way. Gosh, I understand that. I want that from people in my life too. So it makes sense. And yet it also didn't feel fair. Like, why do I have to do that? I didn't sign up for that, and you've hurt me, so why should I give that to you, right? So this dynamic starts to happen. It's like a reverberation between yourself and the other person. So that was a phase that I went through, understanding that he really needed me and I wasn't there for him, and that's why he was behaving the way he was. But there was still another level, and that's what I want to share today. And it was an insight that came to me a few nights ago, and it was really humbling, because Spirit and my higher self, often in the nighttime, I get to see things about myself that I just can't see from the ordinary daytime consciousness. This is not a dream that I'm having, it's a lucid state, but it's sort of semi-sleeping, so I'll just kind of wake up in the night and be flooded with these realizations. And usually at this time I can have a chat with my guides and I can understand what they're trying to show me. I'm being shown this stuff for a reason, to help resolve it, and then also to share it with you guys. So that's how it's working. So the thing that I was shown, and the reason it was humbling, is because I suddenly became aware that we were equally to blame for our conflict. And this was a revelation to me, because the ego, when we're in ego consciousness, which is just little mind, it's little Louisa, right? And little Louisa opens up into bigger Louisa, and bigger Louisa opens up into even bigger Louisa. And so we keep going until we become source. So the smaller part of me, that is the part that tends to walk around in daytime consciousness, thinking, having thoughts, feeling things, and making meaning and making story out of those experiences, that little me had been really convinced that he had hurt me and that was it. And therefore I couldn't trust him. So I was the victim, he was the persecutor. But what I was shown is that it's flipped in his experience. So he sees me as the persecutor and he sees himself as the victim. And this perfect mirror situation is going on. It is a perfect mirror. And I remember as I was being shown it in the nighttime journey, I was kind of trying to wriggle out of that truth. I was like, no, it can't be a perfect mirror. Surely he's hurt me more than I've hurt him. You know, I'm a good person. I haven't done anything wrong. And then it was like, oh, wow, but this is just about perception. This isn't about right or wrong. This is about how you perceive what's happened to you, whether you think it's right or wrong. It's about judgment. It's about your judgment, right? And his judgment, or the other person that you're talking about. So I understood that from his perspective, I was just as much the villain, or more so probably in his head. I am the villain, and he's the one that's been hard done by because I've disappointed him over time. So as what often happens is I'm shown a geometric patterning for how these things work, because our reality, our experience is templated, if you like, through sacred geometry, through geometric patterns. And quite often that's what comes to me to describe a certain experience that we have here on earth, right? So I'm showing this pattern. This is my beautiful journal with the peacock feathers, where I write these journeys and these dreams and these revelations that I have. And I'm going to show you, I'll probably take a photo and put it up on the screen, this dynamic, this pattern. This is the image that I was shown. So at the bottom there, you have like two people on an equal. That's what's represented there. And on one hand you have the victimized, and then you have the persecutor. So victim, persecutor. And there's a seed point at which this all begins. There's an event where the persecutor does something to the victim and hurts them. Now, who's to say where that seed point starts? I find that really interesting, and I wasn't given that information from spirit guidance. I'm not actually too sure. I suspect it's something mutual. It may even go way back. It might even be in the contract that you originally had before you came into this life with this person. So I don't know where the seed point is. However, the point is there is a seed point, and from that shoots up like a plant, this dynamic. And what we have is a pattern of victim and a pattern of persecutor. And very quickly in this dynamic, the victim will stand up for themselves, and then the persecutor will feel hurt by that. So let's say, for argument's sake, I mean, it's a bit like the chicken or the egg scenario, right? But let's just simplify it and say there are two children playing with toys, and child A steals child B's toy. That's the first time that the persecution happens. Then, a few weeks later, child B gets back at child A somehow. So maybe subversively steals another toy back, or says to child B, I don't want to play with you anymore, right? And then child A, persecuting child, feels hurt that the victim child would say, I don't want to play with you anymore. So then, because the persecuting child feels angry, they attack again the victim child. And then, of course, the victim child feels wounded and hurt and reacts, right? And so you'll see in this diagram how there's a persecution, and then the victim will stand up for themselves, and then the persecutor will feel victimized, and then the persecutor will attack back, and then the victim will stand up for themselves and attack the persecutor back. And it flips and flops like this, and it creates like a pattern on the sewing machine thread. It's perfectly mirrored. And the thing is, it goes on forever, right? This is the eye-opening part about all this. There is no resolution. When you're in the middle of this victim-persecutor dynamic, you believe that if the persecutor just realizes that they're persecuting you and asks for your forgiveness, then all will be well. right? You can get on with your life and feel justified and like there's been some sort of justice. But the persecutor wants exactly the same thing from you. Persecutor's hurt. And there isn't a solution to that until you let go of it. Even as I'm saying that, I'm kind of like, you know, I know there are situations where hurt is done and the person comes back to you and apologizes, and then everything is resolved. But that's not really the dynamic I'm talking about. That's a different type of relationship that you have with somebody. That's usually a trusting, open, honest relationship that is balanced and transparent. This relationship is different. We know what that feels like. I'm sure you can think of somebody in your life that you've engaged in this dynamic with, victim persecutor. And it has to be a pattern, I guess, for this to be, for it to match what I'm teaching here today. It has to be patterned. So this has to have happened many times. And as with all patterns, there's a car coming. As with all patterns, they set in through habit. It happens again and it happens again and it happens again, and it becomes a pattern. So to break that pattern, this is the thing: liberating from conflict, liberation from conflict. This pattern has been a part of our three-dimensional, fear-based, survival-based experience here on Earth. It happens within families, it happens between neighbours, it happens in business, colleagues, it happens on the personal level, and then it happens on the collective level as well. Whole nations are engaged, warring nations are engaged in the victim-persecutor dynamic. And it is something that we have to drop if we're going to ascend collectively and individually. Now, you can't be controlling what happens on a collective level other than what you're controlling in your heart. And when you deal with the stuff on your level, you are then going to impact the collective. So, you know, this is worth doing. This is a service for yourself and it's a service for the collective. But we cannot move forward into fifth dimensional consciousness, which is, I've talked about it in some other videos. If you're not familiar with the concept of fifth dimensional, maybe watch the last video I made, the personal and planetary despair, why all is well despite how it seems. The Earth, Gaia, all of us are going through a huge consciousness shift. We are learning as human beings how to treat each other from a much higher perspective, from a higher place of consciousness. It's a higher frequency. Frequencies are emotions. So these frequencies are very pure, they're very light, they are love-filled, they are open and transparent, they are balanced, the energy is balanced there. And there is none of this stuff. There can't be, because in that dimension everything is seeable, viewable, knowable, right? And it won't survive. For a lot of us that have ascended to a certain level now, we are just unable to lie, we are unable to hurt people and just walk away from that. We're unable to manipulate people in deceptive ways. There are just lots of things that cannot be done when you're vibrating at this frequency. So, and conversely, you'll also stand up for yourself. That's the other part of it. You know, you won't become a doormat. That won't be okay for you anymore. You won't be able to sit in situations where power is unbalanced or where truth is not of its highest. So you'll get very uncomfortable very quickly in those situations. So quite often with this victim persecutor dynamic, the first step is to step away from it, because you need to step away from it so you can activate your own power and you can see what's happening between you and this person. And you can do a lot of work. You've got to do a lot of work on letting go of your own self-judgment, because you wouldn't be in a victim dynamic if you didn't somewhat believe what this person was saying to you or doing to you, if it wasn't pushing your buttons. So there is some stored judgment and things that you can work on within yourself, your shadow work as they call it, But then when you step back into relationship with this person, the tricky thing is that usually this pattern reestablishes itself because it's held in the shared memory of the two of you. It's held in the quantum field. It's like two atoms coming together that have a shared history and memory, and boom, it activates again, right? So like I said, it takes a lot of work to untangle this. And yet paradoxically, because so many paradoxes at the level of the fifth dimension, this is so simple. This is actually just about letting go of this dynamic, right? But to let go of it, you have to let go of the story. So what I was shown in my journey was not only this pattern, but I was also almost like I was able to so I had this portrait of this person built up over years, like a portrait of them being nasty and mean and hard-hearted, and they didn't understand me, and whatever, all these judgments, right? And those judgments were put there by my ego to protect me from this hurt. So I'm not judging myself for having those judgments because I needed them for a while. I needed that armor while I built myself up. But I was able to see in this night journey, this revelation that I had at nighttime, oh my gosh, it was like I went behind that 180 degrees, saw everything from a completely different angle, and went, wow, I had, in building up this case against this person of how terrible they were, I had actually forgotten how to love them. I'd forgotten how to see the beauty in them. I'd forgotten those times when they were kind and nice to me, those qualities, those strengths which I do admire. I'd let my heart harden, right? And that's okay. I'm not beating myself up at all because we're human. We're going to do this stuff, right? But we're also outgrowing it. We can outgrow it. And when I realized with this humility that I had been judging this person most likely as much as he's been judging me, it was like a light bulb went off because I went, oh my God, this is utterly futile. It's futile. We're never going to resolve it from this level of consciousness. As long as I'm in victim dynamic mode, as long as I'm feeling like a victim and he's the persecutor, we're not going to resolve it. The dynamic will continue. And it's totally futile because we're mirroring each other. Yeah, I was just looking at my book and I realized I also called it the judgment dynamic. So that's also a good term for it. Someone in our life that we feel judged by and we judge back. And we cannot resolve that story from the level of judgment. We have to learn how to drop our judgment. We have to learn how to disentangle ourselves from the story. And I thought perhaps if you guys can see the picture of it, how it looks as geometric pattern, it will help you. It will intercept. What happens is the mind, let's say you just suddenly think of that person, right? The mind goes on a story. It's an old habitual story that recreates this pattern. The story, I don't know, memories come up of how much you've been hurt, feelings bubble up as well, feelings of frustration or anger or disappointment, grief, whatever it is. And so we go on this little trip with our mind, with our story. And these thoughts, they have a life of their own in a sense until we take back our control, until we take back our control from the level of awareness and we can see that story. It's just like a weed growing, right, in our unconscious, coming up into our conscious. It's a weed. As soon as it emerges in the consciousness, boop, you pull it out. And you do it through like heightened awareness of self, watching your thoughts, and things like this can really help. I know for me, Spirit often gives me a geometric pattern or an image that will just, it acts like a circuit breaker. It cuts through that story, or like a nice pair of pruning scissors on the weed, right? Just cuts through. So for you, it might be an affirmation. I choose a new story, you could say. I release the old story. See it for what it is. Try to get the highest perspective you can, that you are simply telling a story and they are simply telling a story. And that's all they are. They're stories. Ego, your little Louisa part will not want to drop it, because it's rather like a child that's got hold of a cookie. It's like, no, it's mine. This is my story. It's mine. Right? And if that's how you feel, that's okay. That's what you work with. You know, you've got to always work with where you're at. This has taken years for me to finally be able to let go and know that that's not serving me anymore. I don't want to eat that cookie anymore. I want love. I want unity. I want happiness. Okay? As you get the hang of this, it only grows faster and faster, exponentially. Your ability to feel happiness, to live in states of bliss, to be able to drop old stories, to catch yourself in moments when you go back into the old paradigm, it becomes accelerated. It's like a snowball. In the beginning stages, it is really hard. I concede that, you know, you've got to put so much practice and effort into it. But, you know, you're being supported. Please, honestly, believe me, you are being supported by the energies on this planet, by the beings that are around us that are now beginning to show themselves to humanity. There are lots of people that are meeting guides and speaking to guides, and they might call them guides, they might call them aliens, extraterrestrials, beings from other dimensions, higher selves, elementals, fairies. We're being spoken to, we're being communicated with, because the veils between the dimensions are dropping or dissolving, you could say. So when you ask for the help, it's going to come quickly. When your intention is coming from heart level, you know, if none of this kind of resonates or lands with you because it all sounds too complex and you're still fighting all those stories, then the one tip also is to just drop into your heart space and make a wish from that space, a wish for peace, a wish for love. You don't have to, you know, sometimes it can be too hard to say I wish to forgive this person or I wish to be forgiven, because still that word forgiveness can kind of activate those stories. Forgiveness, yeah, I need his forgiveness, and he should be forgiving me, and blah, blah, blah. So off we go. You know, words carry a lot of frequency and connotation, so you have to find the right words for you. But if you find a word that just feels the way you would want it to feel in heaven, think of how heaven would feel. How would I be then? You certainly wouldn't be fighting with people or having conflicts with them, right? So this is what we're creating. We're doing it, guys. It's practical. It's not some airy-fairy concept. This is hard work in the trenches of the psyche, the heart and the mind working together. I know sometimes people look at this stuff and they think it's just woo-woo, or it's, I don't know, like people like us are just living in some ivory tower. We are working super hard every day, every moment. But as I said, it just gets easier and easier. And now it's not work to me. Now it's exciting and interesting. And, you know, you become a master. And like with it, when mastering any craft, there comes a point in that craft when it's easy and you know what to do. And then you look for new challenges, like what's next? So, yeah, if you can embrace this stuff, and know that it will liberate you, because it will. Okay, so trust, work hard, follow your heart and what your heart wants. I hope that was helpful, and I will see you in my next video. Please let me know if you enjoyed it, pop a comment in the box below, and yeah, I love hearing from everybody, and I love sharing these videos. They are as beneficial for me as they hopefully are for you. Okay, lots of love. Namaste.